Aloha, Karen. Thank you for joining us today. You've been a paddler down here in Kahului Bay for a long, long time, and I'm wondering if you could tell us some of the changes you've seen in health concerns with paddlers over the years.
Well, what I'm seeing is it's starting to swing back to the way it used to be. When I first started paddling, they emptied the cannery and all sorts of other things into the bay here, and people got such bad infections that their physicians would actually tell them they weren't allowed to paddle anymore. Then they stopped putting all that stuff into the bay. Things got better. The algae was less, the infections tapered off. They were still existent, but they weren't as bad. And then the cruise ships came along, and if you Google cruise ship pollution fine, you'll see that the cruise ships are just real bad actors when it comes to dumping stuff in the ocean. And we were having more problems again. And we thought, well, when the 3 cruise ships went down to 1, that our problems would get better. But in fact, they're not getting better, and things are getting worse again. And they're particularly getting worse off Kanaha, where my canoe club has like a 5%, 5 out of the 20, which is 20%, sorry, infection rate of this MRSAs, the ones where you have to buy the really expensive stuff to cure because they're resistant to most antibiotics. And we're seeing the windsurfers and so on get the same thing. So we're thinking that it's the injection wells. And in fact, we've heard, well, not heard, we've read in the EIS that the injection wells on the shoreline by Kahului, their intention is to put that untreated, well, partially treated water into the ocean. This water has not gone through the R1 disinfectant process, and they're putting it right into the ocean, and it's giving us infections.
And beyond paddling and the windsurfing, as you mentioned, what other activities take place here in Kahului Bay?
Well, here in the bay, we have the fishermen, we have the Kupuna Fisherman's Hale over there, we have surfers. This is where Eddie Aikau grew up, and over there is where he started surfing, so it's kind of a historical spot. So we have the kids coming down because this is one of the only places where the Kahului kids can walk to, where there's a white sand beach, and there's a lot more of the local people here in this area, and so I think we kind of get overlooked here.
And I know that Kihei and Lahaina treatment plants have their water treated to an R1 level, at least a portion of that, and some of it is used for reuse and recycling of the water. Yet Kahului treatment plant does none of that. Everything that goes into the injection wells comes out into the nearshore waters. Yet this is one of, in fact, it is the central beach area for Central Maui. What do you think about that?
It's definitely, and like I say, we're having problems not here, only here in the bay, but off Kanaha, where the windsurfers, the kiters, and the paddlers all are, plus the divers.
So with your years of experience here and knowledge of the health effects that have happened over the years and the issue of reuse, what would be your advice to the Department of Health and the mayor? What can we do to make this situation better?
Well, I've been very disappointed with our mayor because on the one hand, she's saying that she wants to reuse the water, but her actions are not only not reusing the water, not making any plans towards that, but actually building more injection wells. And she's appointed somebody who's a lawyer as head of environmental management instead of somebody who wants to move us in the direction of reuse. And what I'm saying, what I want to say to everybody is we lost out big time because of this policy. Kauai was ready. They had plans, and they got a big grant from the stimulus program that put people to work and also cleaned up their water. And that's all I'm asking. I realize that we are in kind of dire economic straits, and the county can't possibly finance this. But the thing is, if we have the plans ready, we can get the federal funds, and that is going to accomplish 2 things. It's going to put people to work, which is real important, and it's going to clean up the water so that we're not all getting these MRSA infections.
This is really interesting and important information. Thank you so much for sharing your time today and your mana'o, Karen. Aloha.
Oh, thank you for publicizing this.
Tim, as chair of Surfrider Foundation's Maui chapter, I was hoping you could share with us some of the programs that Surfrider is doing to not only monitor water quality, but also to protect the health of surfers and other water users.
Well, water quality is obviously a huge part of Surfrider Foundation. Our mission statement is protection and preservation of the world's ocean, waves, and beaches through conservation, activism, research, and education. So you can see water quality is definitely a huge part of that. Here on Maui, there's several different areas that fit into our water quality program, one of which is the Blue Water Task Force. About 10 years ago, Surfrider Foundation purchased the Blue Water Task Force equipment, which is over at the NOAA Humpback Whale Sanctuary in Kihei. And for a number of years, we've continued to do bacteria testing throughout the island and then report that online. So you can check, near beaches and see what the bacteria levels are. Oftentimes we find after heavy rains, those levels will go up. So, if you see a spike, you check what the weather was like during that time as well. And that's an ongoing program. We're hoping to get that. For a while it was offline, and we're hoping to get that going pretty soon again with the help of Robin Knox and a handful of really great volunteers. One thing that we need everybody's help with that uses the ocean is currently the physicians aren't required to report staph infections and MRSA infection. MRSA is the antibiotic-resistant staph. They're not currently. They don't have to report that to the Department of Health. So Surfrider Foundation has an illness report form where you can actually click on our website, www.surfrider.org/Maui, and right on our homepage is a tab you can click on, and you can fill that form out and say what beach you were at when you got sick, what the day, what the time is, what your activity was, and that helps us keep records, and that way we can report when we go to the county or the state and say, look, here's this many people that have got sick in the last month or in the last 6 months or in the last year. So it gives a little bit more accountability, and it's not so vague when we start looking at some of these issues of injection wells and pollutant runoffs and so on and so forth. We can pinpoint hot spots around the island where people have been getting sick. So if the state's not going to mandate that doctors report it, this is something we can do to make sure that we have a lasting record.
Tim, this has been really interesting and valuable information, and I thank you so much for joining us today and sharing it with us. Aloha.
Here's what you can do. Push for more public acceptance of water reuse through educational programs at schools and community organizations. Contact your elected officials, the State Department of Health, and the Environmental Protection Agency, and demand that more be done. Ask the candidates running for office where they stand on this issue. If you've contracted a staph infection while using Maui's coastal waters, go online to Surfrider Foundation at surfrider.org and fill out their ocean illness form. It helps track problem areas.